There's something you just said that I think made something click for me as to why I uh I feel I get defensive at the idea that people will throw out there of where are you at on your road to recovery?
Mm,
And every time I hear that, I can't help but, at least in my mind, get extremely defensive, if not a little angry. In Scientology, the whole paradigm is there's something wrong with you. We're going to make you better.
yeah.
Or you get to the point where you learn not to react. And I was about to say to you, yes, it's a virtue. That's considered the right way to be. The right
Mhm.
way to be is that you will not react to anything anyone says or does. And that's considered the right way to be.
Yeah.
And if you are someone who does react, that's the wrong way to be.
Mhm.
And in order to even have this conversation, it's predicated on the idea that there is a right way to be.
Yeah.
And the idea that there's a normal that people should aspire to. There's a baseline that if you're above it, you're great. And if you're below it, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
That's an idea I kind of wholesale reject. I'm speaking in generalities here, but okay. So now let's take the flip side. You leave Scientology. Now you leave, and people go, oh, there's things about you now that are wrong because you were in Scientology and you need to work
Yeah.
to recover and improve those things. And I go,
Mhm.
first of all, what a holier than thou way of thinking.
Yeah.
Like, if we're all damaged in some way, who are
Mhm.
you to say which damage is okay and which damage is not okay? What if I'm okay with the ways in which I'm damaged?
Yeah. Yeah.
What if I'm okay with those things getting better over time? But what if I'm okay with the ways in which I'm damaged? And who the hell are you to tell people, "Oh, you've made so much progress in your recovery." Oh, you mean being more like you? So you
Yeah.
mean because I'm in Scientology, I'm this way, but I should work to be more like you.
Yeah.
And when I say you, I'm not talking about a specific person. I'm talking about in
Yeah.
general. People are like, recovery, recovery. I'm not shitting on the idea of recovery.
Mhm.
What I am shitting on is anyone who thinks that they are in a position to tell someone else the things they should be working to change about themselves. Everybody have things about themselves that other people wish would change.
Mhm.
I'm kind of monologuing here. What are your feelings on this?
I
This idea of, well, anything I just said.
Yeah, I believe, and in my experience and when I've met people outside of Scientology and I got to know, quote, the real world, I feel like most people have their own cult. Mine happened to be a legitimate cult, but they have addiction in the family, a controlling relationship, a controlling family, another high control organization. But the idea is you become indoctrinated that there's one way to believe, you believe that one way, and that's used as a way to control you. That's kind of like my guideline. I feel like we swing, we're so far one way in Scientology. There's an extreme, especially growing up in Scientology and being in the Sea Org, your demeanor, the way you present yourself, the non-reaction, the robotness, that is like the norm. And then you leave all of that and you're exposed to all kinds of different emotions. And there's some emotion in the Sea Org, but it is so severely penalized that you don't dare. You don't even want to somebody know if you're sick because you're going to get in trouble. I knew a guy once who got mugged on Hollywood Boulevard, and you know what happened? He got COMEV'd, which is a committee of evidence, which is like this justice action taking on you that you pulled this in.
Kind of like a court martial, sort of.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So in coming out and or leaving Scientology and figuring these things out, you're right. My biggest realization about it is there's no one way. There's no one way to think, there's no one way to act. I am nobody's shining example of anything. The only thing I will cop to is being a really good cautionary tale for a few things, but I'm just trying to do my own thing too and figure it out. It's taken me a long time, not just post Scientology, but I've met many, many people that either that have become friends and I've looked at their struggles and interestingly, they're similar and they were never in a cult, but
Mhm.
struggling with this idea of identity. And you know what I really think it is, Aaron? It's judgment. It's
Yeah.
judgment. It's human nature to judge the crap out of each other, to judge each other on these actions. And when you're judging, you're pretty much saying like, "Well, I don't do that." You know what I came to learn? Most people are freaks. And fine, power to you. Fly your freak flag, whatever. For me, it was letting go of judgment. Whether you're in Scientology or you're out of Scientology, the magic, you do you and let other people do them. And
Yeah.
if they don't agree with you or they have this opinion about you, everybody has one, right? Just like
Yeah.
assholes. Everybody has one. Everybody's going to have an opinion. And I think when we can be okay with who we are and our flaws, and I know when I mess up. I know when I say something that, afterwards I'm like, okay, that was probably inappropriate. I don't always know, but I'm learning. I'm learning, I'm learning, I'm learning. I walked into a meeting the other day. This is the kind of stuff that's still like, I'm like, read the room, Natalie, read the room. And I have this, tendonitis going on. And they're like, what happened? And I just immediately blurt out, oh, I have a chronic masturbation problem. And which for the record, I do not, but there would be nothing wrong with it if I did. But that's the thing where you don't have a button on it. You don't have a button on it. It was my poor coworkers who I work with. It's like when you don't have and it's probably what made me good in radio because I had no filter. My coworkers, I would talk about this butt rash that I had. I didn't know it was inappropriate for the workplace because even though I'd been out for 13 years, I pretty much had been self-employed. I didn't really work with a bunch of other people and like I do now. So I'm still always learning. And you know what? They still love me. They laugh. They're okay with it. It's like they accept me, I accept them. And I think leaving and coming out of whatever high control, whatever your personal cult is, Scientology or whatever, letting go of the judgment, it's an exercise. It's something I constantly have to work on because I fall right back into that too. But the freedom in that is that you realize like it's okay if somebody thinks that I'm this or I'm that and I don't feel that I am. That's okay because it doesn't change. I'm over here like living my best life.
Yeah.
I'm working through my own stuff and they are too. They are
Yeah.
too. And I try
Yeah.
to remember that with a lot of ex-Scientologists too. Everybody's working through their own stuff and they're going to do it in different ways. And we are just
Yeah.
broken ass pieces, even people never in Scientology figuring it out.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'll even go so far as to say I've been specifically asked by some people if I could do a chat with them about the subject of recovering after leaving Scientology, and my answer's been nope.
Mhm.
And I go, I'm not even going to do anything. I don't want to do anything that's going to look like some kind of virtue signaling,
Mhm.
trying to define what path you have to follow in order to be a good
Yeah.
recovering Scientologist. Or if you fall short of it, you're not a good recovering Scientologist. And it's funny because it'll sound like I'm against recovery. What I'm against is trying to shame people for whether they have or have not done the things you think they should or should not have done. Because even though many people will say your videos have helped me so much in my road to recovery, and I go, great. I mean, for me, talking about things publicly is probably what someone would say is my recovery. But honestly, I
Yeah.
feel I feel like a hypocrite even saying those words because I go, I'm not doing this for recovery. I'm doing this to be David Miscavige's worst nightmare. I'm doing this to clog the first page of Google results on Scientology. I'm doing this to
Mhm.
show people they don't have to be afraid of Scientology. I'm
Yeah.
doing this as a big FU to everyone who refused to not destroy my family. I'm doing this for all sorts of reasons. Recovery is not one of them. And yet, I'm not against recovery because you go, but what is recovery?
Yeah.
Recovery is different for every single individual. And I'm like, who
Mhm.
else had a great recipe for recovery? L. Ron Hubbard. I don't know. I sound so cynical and jaded, don't I?
It's all part of your process. You just got to
But
work
I'll
on
tell
that recovery, Aaron.
and maybe I just have a button on the word because there's certainly
Mhm.
things
Yeah.
I've said that have been keystones to what someone else would say, oh, that's your recovery. And one of them was reading the book, Steve Hassan's book, Combating Cult Mind Control,
Mhm.
where I realized I was really holding on to the fact that even though I no longer believed in Scientology and Scientology was a destructive cult, I'm like, but it sure was unique though, wasn't it? We sure were involved in something special there, weren't we? And I read Steve Hassan's book and his experience with the Moonies, and I was like, I was sobbing uncontrollably
Mm.
listening to this book, and it was dawning on me. I didn't realize how much I was holding on to the fact that I still thought Scientology was a special kind of bullshit. And I was having to confront the fact of like, oh my God, it was garden variety bullshit. We fell for garden variety bullshit. And it was devastating for me. And it was also, you would say it was a big step in my road to recovery, even though I don't like that word.
Yeah. No, I totally get it. I think it's a huge part of, anytime you're and like I said, for me, talking about it helps me process. That's kind of like the word I think that I use because for me, that's how it feels. I did not know that so much of what happened to me growing up in Scientology and being in the Sea Org and being on staff, that it was traumatic. I mean, I knew I didn't like it, but it's when you're like when your entire existence, you were stuck in fight or flight, you're kept there. That's all you know. So if things start seeming kind of like almost okay or not stressful, you're like, "Oh my gosh, like what is this?" It's for me, it's been coming out of that and realizing that I don't need to be in fight or flight. It caused a lot of issues. I mean, physically, I had 5 years ago I had gotten Lyme disease. I lost my ability to walk. I couldn't walk for a
Oh, wow.
while. I I lost my sense of smell. This was way pre-COVID. I had all these neurological symptoms. It was a whole thing. And I saw multiple doctors. I slowly got better and got better. And it's only been the last year. It'll be a year in January where I've not needed to use a cane. And
Wow.
I went from doctor to doctor, and I had gotten a new primary physician, and she was fantastic. I was getting muscle spasms all up my body and my legs that were so strong that when they did blood work, they said, "Your muscles, your spasms are so strong, they're breaking down your muscles on a cellular level."
Wow.
And I would get MRI after MRI because they thought maybe I was going down the MS path, but I didn't. So there was no hard wiring that they could find to explain what was happening to me.
Hmm.
And so they sent me to the University of Minnesota and I saw 2 different neurologists, and what it came down to is they're like, "We understand this today. A couple years ago, we didn't even understand it, but they call it functional neurology, where it's not a hardwire issue with your brain, it's a soft wire issue. Your brain has rewired in ways that is causing your brain and your nervous system to not properly communicate. And when you're faced with some type of major stress, which is when fight or flight kicks in, you need your brain and your nervous system to work together, it goes into overdrive. And for me, it manifested in my whole body. I would have these non-brain seizures, like I would be alert and know what was happening, the
Wow.
the muscle spasms, all that. So I worked with them and what their solution was for it. This is funny. They said, they're like, "This is what we think it is." And then they go, but here's the thing, we usually see this in veterans who've done multiple tours of duty. Were you in the military? I'm like, "No, no." And I it's not something I wanted to get into. I was still like, I don't even know where to start with this." So I was kind of just playing stupid in there. And you could tell they were kind of confused. And I'm like, I was raised in a cult, da 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 da. All this stuff went on, blah, 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 blah. It was Scientology. And as soon as I said Scientology, they were like, "Oh, okay." And what they said, though, they said, "We now know that you can rewire a brain again, that with neuroplasticity, you can change it. You can get your brain and your nervous system back in alignment." I was doing the wrong type of physical therapy. I needed neurological physical therapy. I needed therapy. They told me about cognitive behavioral therapy. And to be honest, my insurance wasn't that great. So I went on YouTube and I started following this chick, Therapy in a Nutshell. And she talked about this cognitive behavioral therapy. And I started just thinking with it and using it as a tool. And it resonated with me. I'm like, this makes a lot of sense. I started to get better. It was like the cane less and less. And like I said, I'm like 9, 10 months now where I don't need it. I'm like, I just started walking to work out because if I do something really physical, I'll still get some muscle spasms, but nothing like what they were.
Wow.
And this really, for me, after coming out of this and realizing, like, holy shit, this rewired my brain. It rewired my brain to the point where my brain and my nervous system weren't functioning properly. And I had two ways to go in that moment, either go down the rabbit hole of this will continue to, because I did have another doctor tell me, you'll just continue to get worse.
Hmm.
And I didn't accept that. Or take some steps to try to get my brain to wire back in a way that's more that works for me, that doesn't have my body react that way to stress in these situations. And that's something I've been working on. And through all of that, and that's why I think I'm kind of where I'm ready to talk about it, because I want to process it with how I see the world today. I want to look at it, I want to talk about it, I want to see it, I want to take it apart with the point of view that I have today, and the more peace that I have today as well, and process that.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, oh, Yankee Mama Love, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe right here. Bye!